The HOA president called 911 because I bought a lake. Yeah, the whole lake. Not a kayak, not a slip. And now there are 3 police boats idling off my dock, while she points at me like I'm a bomb about to go off, yelling that I'm a threat to community safety. And I'm standing there in socks with a coffee mug thinking, "Officer, the only thing armed here is the paperwork in my backpack. My name is Evan Cole. I spent 25 years making grocery store coolers. Behave in July saved what I could. Buried my dad and finally bought peace. 3 acres, a 1950s A-frame, and 12 acres of water as clear as church glass at the edge of Maple Hollow Preserve. The kind of place where morning smells like pine and last night's rain, and the only calendar that matters is sunlight on the water. 2 days in peace meets a white Lexus parked sideways in my drive, like a gate out. Steps this woman with pearls and a clipboard and the kind of smile people practice in mirrors. She taps the faceplate on my door at 6:02 a.m. and says, "Mr. Cole, I'm Paige Ellison, president of the Maple Hollow HOA. We need to talk, standards-approved watercraft. Only your canoe violates waterfront aesthetics, and your dock needs immediate review by our consultant, Mr. Brent Sawyer." Then she hands me a courtesy notice already checked for $500, like we're playing parking ticket bingo, and I haven't even unpacked my coffee grinder, you know what I mean. 48 hours later, a certified letter says unauthorized watercraft storage, 500 unpermitted structural modification, 500 environmental hazard creation, 750 total, due in 2 days. Legal action. Delayed, and when I call the hotline. Paige picks up on the first ring like she was waiting. Says there was an emergency inspection last night for safety. I check my cameras, and there's Brent at 2:03 a.m. on my dock with a headlamp taking pictures of my dad's old canoe, like it robbed a bank. For the record, I don't throw punches first, I read first, so I pour coffee and read my deed word by word until the legal gravel starts to shine. Water and mineral rights, an 1880s survey, a note about navigable waters, federal commerce jurisdiction, and I drive to the county office where a clerk named Darla slides me a box of maps that smell like a library basement and taps a red stamp says, "If that lake is yours under federal classification, then HOA authority stops at the shoreline," and I walk back to my truck, feeling like somebody just put steel in my spine. The next morning, chainsaws scream at dawn. Not a neighbor trimming a limb. I mean the kind of saws that make your teeth hum. I look out my window, and Brent's crew is cutting the 60-year-old oak that shades my dock. I run barefoot and ask what the hell they're doing. Brent says, "Emergency removal. Voted last night, safety hazard." I say that tree's older than we are. He says exactly overdue. And then the trunk goes down with that heavy chest thud that knocks fish out from under your dock, like spooked birds. I call the sheriff. The dispatcher is polite, but treats it like a civil squabble. That evening, Paige arrives with a bill for my portion of the removal, $3,200, plus a survey dated that day that puts the tree 6 inches on common property, which is wild, even for a magic trick. And while she talks, I just start photographing everything. Stump rings, saw marks, truck plates, bits of bark floating like brown confetti. Because if they're going to fight with paper, I'm going to answer with better paper. That night, I dig out my granddad's old water test kit, because my gut says their next move is contamination. I take baseline samples at midnight from 3 spots time-stamped and GPS pinned and right on cue. Brent shows up next morning with what looks like a science fair kit. I film him and ask for his EPA certification number. He blinks like I asked for the moon, then sweats, then packs up and leaves without a word. That happened. By then, the neighborhood starts peeking from behind curtains. Maya, who runs a yoga studio, slips me a note that says, "You're not the only one." Call tonight, so after dark, we meet in a lavender-scented garage and sit in a circle like we're planning a jailbreak. Gordon, the treasurer, with a tired voice. Trent, the landscaper with grease under his nails. Rosie, the retired teacher holding a binder that could stop a door, and old Pete, the electrician who talks with both hands. And they tell me about fines that grow like weeds, consulting jobs to Brent that never made sense. Pressure to sell houses remediated and flipped for a profit that hurts to hear. And while we talk, I get a text from a blocked number saying, "Shut down this meeting or code enforcement shuts down the studio." We peek through the blinds, and Brent's pickup is idling across the streetlights off binoculars glinting, and the temperature in the room drops a few degrees. Next morning, my water line is cut clean, where it enters the house. Not broken, severed with a fake disconnection tag, zip tied to the pipe. The water department says that's fraud file, a police report. A deputy shows up and says felony, like he means it. And a federal voice enters the chat. Special Agent Dana Whitaker calls me. After my lab emails bounce around, says your consultant isn't licensed anywhere. We can find his name sits on 3 LLCs tied to HOAs across the county document, everything like you sleep with a notebook. And I do, because the smell of gasoline in my boathouse later that day says this story is getting uglier than fines. The fire chief sweeps a UV light and finds accelerant traces tucked by the panel. Says professional job. And 2 nights later, Trent's garage burns his work truck. Turns into a black skeleton while he stands in the driveway with a coffee mug. He doesn't realize it's spilling down his wrist, and he says, "They called 20 minutes before to warn him about community cooperation." And that's the moment the fear clicks into anger that doesn't shout. It just focuses. County officials show up with glossy binders and official stamps that look very official. They quarantine my shore, say hazardous, bacteria collapsing dock contaminated soil. I take the entire packet to the state university where Dr. Priya Shah runs real tests and writes pristine. Twice says if those county numbers were true, your fish would be belly up and your nose would know it from the mailbox. And on the way home, I dig through the corner. The near fire didn't eat. Find my granddad's old cabinet. And inside the actual 1887 land patents with wax seals and territorial signatures that say navigable waterway. Under federal protection, no quarantine or seizure without a federal court order. No local end runs allowed. And when I read that sentence, I feel the ground steady under me again. Dawn, 3 days later, the heavy machinery returns. Diggers Road, closed signs, county trucks. Brent is carving a trench toward the lake like he's opening a vein. A supervisor in a hard hat waves papers and says, "Emergency isolation." I don't argue. I grab my survey tripod. And jeeps and walk the line calling out measurements, so my phone records them 47 feet inside the federal boundary. I say it loud enough for Brent to hear when he kills the engine. And then the sirens do that. Doppler bend, and 2 black SUVs roll in with U.S. Marshals and an EPA van. And then the sheriff slides in hot because the county called backup. And for a minute, my driveway is a civics lesson. County emergency health order versus federal waterway law. And the EPA agent crouches at the trench and says this would drain 60% of the lake in 3 hours, and Agent Whitaker puts the sheriff on the phone with the U.S. attorney, and you can watch his face move from certain to careful. In under a minute, he tells the county to pack it up and Brent, because he can't help himself, tries to finish the trench. While everyone's talking, 3 marshals move like they practiced one. Climbs, 1 kills the ignition, 1 makes the cuffs click, and the machine coughs to silence while the water holds. You'd think that would be the exhale, but Page sends 1 more flurry of fancy reports with seals and reference numbers. I call the number on the letterhead and put it on speaker, and a lady in Buffalo tells me they're a document printing company, not a lab. And I look at Agent Whitaker, who smiles like Saturday morning, and that's when I call Channel 7, and a reporter named Kelsey rolls up fast, sticks a mic in my face, and asks what it feels like to find out your lake is federally protected against HOA overreach. And I say I don't like fights, but I like being pushed around even less. You know what I mean? And Page steps into the frame, declaring an emergency and ordering the press to leave. Kelsey says, "Sure. What's your certification number?" And Page does the head tilt. Dogs do when a new noise happens. Tries to say she's an emergency environmental coordinator, and Agent Whitaker steps into camera and says there's no such position in this county. And the reports filed today carry forged numbers tied to a print shop. And that is when Page runs, in heels, across my lawn toward the lake, like she might swim to a better story. A marshal catches her at the shoreline. She slips and face plants into the mud whirls and all. And the handcuffs click while phones record, and the water looks calm, like it was waiting for this. That night, the community center is packed shoulder to shoulder, huffy anger that hush people get when they realize the game was rigged. Gordon puts bank statements on a projector and walks through line items paid to Brent's shells. Rosie flips to a page where Mrs. Patterson sold for half value after a blizzard of citations. I hold up the 1887 patent and say every threat and fine against my water was illegal. Agent Whitaker confirms multi-county charges, and hands go up like prairie grass in wind. But I stop you right there, because I promised myself to end on the consequence, not the parade. Page in cuffs, the excavator dead, the room ready to vote. And I turn to you because this is where the argument lives. When does a citation become harassment? When does safety talk turn into a cudgel? When do you call the feds? And when do you say enough and start filming and writing down names and numbers? I kept my lake, and yeah, I kept the receipts. But I know some of you think HOAs protect property values, and some of you think they're a mask people hide behind to bully their neighbors. So tell me where you land. Right, wrong. Somewhere in the messy middle. Drop your city. Your story. Your what I would have done. Hit like if this made your jaw clench, and share it with the neighbor who keeps getting mystery notices. And if you want more, David versus paperwork. Goliath stories that cut to black. When justice lands, subscribe and stick around because the next fight might be on your street, and the law might be stronger than the clipboard.